Hello, everybody. While we're waiting for other people to join us, would you like to go to the chat box and just introduce yourself and say where you're from? And we'll start in about 1 minute. Hi, Kim from Kazakhstan. Welcome. And Martine from West Sussex, hello to you. While we're just waiting for a minute, do go over to the chat box and just introduce yourself and say who you are. And we'll start in just a wee while. Hi, Raymond from Hong Kong. Very well. What time is it in Hong Kong at the moment, Raymond? And Nadia from Russia. Oh, 3 o'clock, okay. Oh, half past midnight. Well done for being here. Anna from Bristol, Ruth from Twickenham. Shan, sorry if I mispronounce it. Magda from Poland. Elisabetta from Italy. Ali from Northern Cyprus. Excellent. Okay, we've got quite a lot to get through, so I think that we'll start, and if people come in a little bit late, I don't think that's too much of a problem. Just to introduce myself, my name's Sarah Philpot. I'm an IELTS teacher, teacher trainer, and materials writer. I'm based in Paris. I work for the British Council for Global IELTS, and it's a real pleasure to be back with Language Live. As I've attended it as a speaker for several years now, though I do miss the buzz of being in London and actually seeing all of you face to face. Thank you, Sian, for correcting my pronunciation. Sorry about that. And I didn't know it was Welsh for Jane, so there's something I've learned. Okay, so the programme, what we're going to try and get through today is a quick overview of Writing Task 1. For those of you who don't know so much about IELTS or the sort of nitty-gritty of the test. And we're going to look at the 2 diagram questions in particular, because there's something that my students find particularly difficult. And so I thought that might be more helpful. So we're going to look at some of the problems and difficulties people have with them. We're going to analyse the question, write the introduction, the all-important introduction in Writing Task 1, organise the answer and Q&A, and then I'm going to go through some resources that I hope will be useful for either you, if you're a test taker, or I notice we've got several teachers with us, resources that teachers can use for themselves and or for their students. But first of all, just to find out a little bit more about you, I'm going to put up a poll question. So just 2 questions here for the moment. Have you taken the IELTS test before? Yes or no? And if you are a test taker, what score do you need? Don't worry if you haven't taken the test or you don't know what score you need, but for those of you who do, if you can just look at the poll, and if you can, hold on, I know, sorry, I've just got the wrong thing. Let's just start that again. Okay, let's try that. Okay, so if you could just mark in the poll question, yes or no for have you taken the IELTS test before, and then if you know what score you need, just tick that as well. I'll just give you a minute or so for that. Okay, so that's most of you. So let's have a look at the results. Okay, so about 1/3 of you who voted have taken IELTS. Good, that sort of experience will be helpful. 2/3 of you haven't. And going from between a 6 and quite a lot of you wanting a 9. Okay, so that's at the higher level. I hope it's going to be something for everybody though in this webinar. Okay, so let's just have a look at what it is. Okay, so in the chat box, could you just fill in the gap, so to speak? So writing task 1 is a description and summary of data. And what form can that data be in? I've given you a couple line graphs and bar charts. Into the chat box, if you could just put your ideas in. Michaela's saying pie charts, Anna's saying maps, Sean is saying pie charts and map. Yep, what about the other ones? Table, yes, absolutely, Raymond. Process, Michaela and Sean again, excellent. Okay, and the number of words, how many words do you have to write? What's the minimum? Yeah, everybody seems to know that. And how much time are you advised to spend? Yes, no, it's 20 minutes. Okay, so a lot of you know quite a lot about it. Let's just put that in. So yes, pie charts, maps and plans, process diagrams, tables, and 150 words and 20 minutes. Okay, so that's the general thing. 20 minutes out of the 1 hour, because writing task 1 is worth 1/3 of the marks, whereas writing task 2 is worth 2/3. So 20 minutes, 40 minutes. And it's very important, I think, that we take that advice quite seriously. Okay, so let's go on to the sort of the meat of this webinar, if you like. This is a sample question, as you can see. So the graph and table below give information about water use worldwide and water consumption in 2 different countries. Summarize the information by selecting reporting, make comparisons where relevant. Just very quickly, what is the first diagram? The diagram on at the top. What type of diagram is that? In the chat box, please. The global water use by sector. Yes, Raymond. Yes, Michaela, thank you. It's a line graph. Excellent. And the one at the bottom, the diagram at the bottom. Yeah, absolutely. It's a table. Okay, so this is actually, I did a bit of research, and using 2 diagrams rather than just the one is becoming more and more common. In fact, recently my students have reported to me that they have not had a single diagram question. So I think it's something that, as test takers, you need to be aware of, and for us as teachers, we need to be aware of the fact that these are coming up more and more often and what we have to do about them. Okay, so those of you who are preparing for IELTS or have taken IELTS before, and those of you who are teachers, who are teaching the test takers, what do you think the main problems are with the 2 diagram type of question in task 1? Can you put your ideas? Time, Shan is saying yes. Yep, absolutely. You've got 2 diagrams. Organising, Arena is saying. Students, Anna is saying students don't know how to combine the data. Kim is saying analysis, comparing different types of data, covering both of them and making the structure clear. The correlation between the data. Yeah, excellent. Okay, that's exactly the problems both my test takers have had and in my classes, and I had when I first started looking at this type of question and thinking, how does one go about it? So the 2, I mean, summing up what you've said, actually, I think it's where to start and how to organise the answer when you've got two lots. Okay, so let's just look at the first bit then. And where do I start? Okay, so obviously, as it is just with one diagram, we have to analyse the question. We have to work out what's there. And I think the first question you have to ask yourself is, do the diagrams show quite different but somehow connected information, or do the diagrams show closely related information? My analysis is it tends to be one of those two types. They're either, they've got different information, but they are connected, or they're actually quite closely related. And that is terribly important because that dictates the organisation of the whole essay. Okay. For the moment, I've got a couple of questions. One from Kim, will there be a session on task 2? Kim, I'm not sure because I haven't seen the whole programme. But Beatrice is answering no. While I'm actually giving this presentation, could you put any questions in the chat box? Because for some reason, I can't seem to have the Q&A open and the chat box open at the same time until the end of the presentation. So if you've got any questions, either keep them to the end or slip them into the chat box and I'll try and answer them. Okay, so let's go and look at the analysis. Okay. So a little poll question for you. Okay, and some sharing results. Okay. Okay, so have a look at these two diagrams, if you would, and in the poll question, can you tell me whether these diagrams show different but connected information or closely related information? Again, I'll just give you a little while to answer that question. Have a look at them and decide whether they're different but connected or closely related. Okay, let's just have a look at that. Okay, so 65% of you think it's different but connected, 35% think it's closely related. Okay, so let's have a look at it. All right, in fact, I mean, they actually show different information, but it's connected. They're both about water and use of water. But it's not very closely linked. So they're the same sort of topic, but not closely connected. How are they connected, apart from the fact that it's about water use? Is there anything else that connects them? Put your ideas in the chat box. Is there any other point of contact between the two diagrams, apart from the fact that they're using... Yes, that it's measured in cubic or square. One's measured in cubic meters, one's measured in cubic kilometers. Agriculture. Yep. There's a link between agriculture and irrigated land, absolutely. Yes, time. In the top one, we've got 1900 to 2000, but we've also got 2000 in the bottom one as well. Okay, so, I mean, the next one will be obvious, I think, to you, but it'll give you an idea of the difference between just vaguely linked and this. So do these show, let's just, again, let's have the poll. And do these show closely related or different but connected? I've noticed I've just put the answer there in the poll question. Well, that makes it a little bit easier. Okay, let's just leave that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, share results, closely related information. Yes, let's have a look at why. Okay, so how are they connected between those two diagrams? What do you think is the connection between them? Put your ideas in the chat box. So, okay, Sian, yes, they're both about computer ownership. Absolutely. Anything else? Yes, Kim, the time as well. We've got 2002 to 2010, and we've got 2002 and 2010. They're both in, yes, measurement, percentage, both the bar charts. Absolutely, Anna, yep. Yep. Okay, good. All right, so that's basically the difference. That's the first analysis that you have to make between whether they're sort of different but connected, and think about the point of connection, or whether, like these, they're closely related. And from that analysis, everything else follows. So the all-important writing of the introduction. Okay, so it doesn't matter whether they're closely related or just sort of connected. You still need to do the classic writing task 1 introduction, which is a rephrasing of what both of the diagrams show, using your own words, using synonyms, etc. The all-important overview of what the main trend or change or importance of the diagram is. And again, a clear overview is something that you have to put. It's in the public descriptors. To get a score of 7 or above for task achievement, you need to have a clear overview. So that's still a very important part of this task. And the other thing that makes it a little bit different from just a one diagram is that you need to put in the introduction any point of crossover or connection between the diagrams. You have to sort of work out what it is that pulls them together, even if it's not very, very close. So let's have a look at the different but connected. So those diagrams on water use. So I'm just going to give you just a minute to read this introduction, this introductory paragraph. And as you're reading it, I'd like you to think what the different colours represent. Okay, so just have a minute to read it through, looking at the diagrams, and then think about what the actual colours represent in this diagram. Okay, so in the chat box, can you tell me what you think the information, the sentence in purple is? So the line graph shows global water usage in agriculture, industry and homes from 1900 to 2000. So what is that? What is that sentence? What's it telling us? Yes, Gula, Nadezhda, I'm not sure, Raymond, rephrasing. It's not the overview at the moment. Okay. So the line graph shows global water usage in agriculture, industry and homes from 1900 to 2000 is just a rephrasing of what the diagram that we're looking at is. Okay, and so what is it, what's in the brown colour? What is the brown? Yes, Martine, thank you. It's introducing what the table is. So it's the rephrasing of what the table is, what we're looking at. So those two sentences just tell the reader, in this case the examiner, what it is you will be discussing. Okay, good. What about blue? What does blue tell us? Careful, Martine, it's an overview, you're quite right, but overview of what? Yeah, it's an overview mainly of the line graph, because remember for the Congo, we haven't got a change over years. Okay, so we've only got 1 year, but this increase in the use of water worldwide is the overview for the line graph, which means that, what is the green? What does green tell us? Yes, in this case, Martine, green is the overview of the table information that Brazil, looking at that, Brazil has greater usage than Congo. Okay, good. And what's the information in red? Why have we got that information in red? Ideas in the chat box. Yes, thank you, Ruth. It shows the connection. Okay, so let's just go back to writing the introduction. So a rephrasing of what both diagrams show, an overview for both diagrams, but also any point of crossover or connection between the diagrams. And that has to all go into the introduction. Okay, at this point, it actually in some ways becomes much simpler for these two diagrams, which have similar but not particularly strongly connected information. Because the way we organize our answer for this is we do that introduction, then we have a body paragraph where we use data from the first diagram that supports the overview we put in the introduction. So we have a body paragraph about the line graph. And then we have the second body paragraph, which is the data that supports the information about the table. So I mean, that becomes much more like just one diagram. So you've got one body paragraph about one diagram and a separate body paragraph about the other, because it's not, they're different but only vaguely connected. So there's no real overlap apart from what you put into your introduction. And if you've got time, you can then rephrase that in your conclusion. Though I do want to stress that those of you who are not so familiar with IELTS, that for writing task 1, there is no need for a conclusion. If you've got time, I think most people like to write a conclusion, a very brief one, but you will not get scored down or get fewer marks if you don't write a conclusion. If you do have time and you want to, then the conclusion should really be just a rephrasing of the overview that you put into your introduction. Okay, so just looking at what a response might be. This is 158 words, although obviously we've got some words for the introduction as well. And again, I'm just going to turn the camera off for a minute and just let you look at that. And again, if you would think about what the language in those different colours represents while you're reading it. Hold on. Sian, I thought candidates shouldn't write a conclusion. No, Sian, it's not a matter of shouldn't, it's that they don't have to. So if they don't have time to write a conclusion, then it's no problem. Paragraphing is not actually mentioned in the public descriptors until band 8, and it doesn't actually say anything about the need for a conclusion. So I always advise my students to write a brief one if they have time, but really not to worry about it if they don't. Okay, let me just give you another minute to read through. Okay, before we look at this, just answer another, because I think it's a very important question. Martine is saying that she normally asks students to write the overview as paragraph 2, but I'm including it in the one into the introduction. Does it matter? No, I mean, it doesn't matter because, as I said, paragraphing is not actually in the public descriptors until band 8. So there's no mention of paragraphing in band 7 and below. So therefore, it cannot be marked for or against, if you like. However, the overview is very often just one sentence, and stylistically, a one-sentence paragraph doesn't look very good. So I think, personally, my advice is to put it as part of the introduction, the last part of the introduction, and then you've got one solid paragraph before you get into the body. And that if for students who are going, test takers who are going for levels 8, 8.5 and 9, that paragraphing does become important at that stage. So I'd advise putting it in the introduction. Okay, so let's have a look at the next poll. Okay, so again, now you've had a chance to look through these two body paragraphs. Can you just vote in the poll question what the language in blue, in green and red is representing? So changes, comparisons and approximations. Which of those is it? Again, I'll just give you a few minutes, a few seconds perhaps, to finish that. Okay, and let's just see what you said. Okay, so the language in blue, yes, absolutely. It's drawing comparisons. If you remember the instructions for task 1, it does say make comparisons where appropriate. So if you can, you really should, because you need to have that in for your task achievement. The language in green is the approximations. And again, with diagrams you get in the IELTS test, very often it's actually quite difficult to see exactly what a value is. You don't have a ruler, you can't sort of put that across the page and try and work it out. And often the space between the values is such that you have to estimate, you have to approximate. And it's much better to approximate rather than putting it down absolutely as it was 500 square cubic kilometers when it's not quite, or it's a little bit more, or you can't quite see. So always approximate if you're not absolutely certain what it is. And yes, obviously the language in red is for showing the changes, that standard vocabulary for describing bar charts, line graphs, etc. So grow, increase, rise, that sort of thing. Okay, good. So I think that one's relatively straightforward. Let's have a look at the second type, which is, as you remember, the two diagrams with closely related information. And so again, we have to look at them and think about what are the main differences and or similarities. And again, it seems that very often when you've got two diagrams that have closely related information, that one tends to give more of a general or global picture and the other one more detailed. So it's worth, if you're practicing for the test or if you're teaching someone for the test, that you get into looking and thinking, is this more general information or more general picture? Is this one giving much more detail? That's something that you need to look out for when you're dealing with these two diagrams. So let's just have a look at those. Okay, I think we won't do a poll question. Let's just do it in the chat. So, which of these two give the more general information, A or B? Yes, well, you're not having, clearly not having any problem with that question at all. Yeah, absolutely. So diagram A, the bar chart in A, is just showing computer ownership in general, whereas we've got much more detail in B, where we've got it by level of education. So if that sort of A gives more of a global picture, and B gives us much more nitty gritty. Okay, so again, what I advise my students to do when they've got something which is quite similar is to just draw up a sort of quick table of what's similar and what's different. So for example, what units are the computer ownership written in? What's the unit they're using? Yes, Anna, percentage. Excellent. Okay. So what I do, I mean, this is sort of a vaguely fancy sort of chart, but actually this is something that students can do very, very quickly on the test paper, just draw up and just work out the other information. So the data format is important. So it's in bar chart A is percentage, bar chart B is percentage. And then what about the time? Similar or different? So have a look again and think about what's similar, what's different between the time that's covered between those two. So what's the obvious similarity? Yes, Gula, I mean, they're same, Michaela, similar years, the span. Yes, yeah, absolutely. So here we've got 2002, 4, 6, 8, 10, and here we've got 2000 and 2010. Okay, so let's just have a look at that. So again, we put that information so we can see where there is overlap and where we can draw comparisons or contrasts. And then obviously we need to know what the main trend is or what the overview is. So let's have a look at that. So again, in the chat box, just look at bar graph A, computer ownership 2002 to 2010, and very simply, what's the overview? What's the main trend between 2002 and 2010? Increase, the trend to increase, yeah, a gradual increase, increasing. Computer ownership is going up, growth, yeah, absolutely. So we've got a sort of a steady increase over this period. What would you say is the trend or the overview in diagram B? Again, put your ideas in the chat box. Remember, you're comparing two things here. You're comparing 2002 and you're comparing 2010, but you're also comparing education level. So in effect, there's sort of like two trends going on here. So what are they? Can you put your ideas in the chat box, please? The rise in all education levels, higher education level, higher usage or ownership of computers. Increase directly proportional to education. Yeah, absolutely. Well, nobody's having any problems with that. Okay, so that's also what I'd get my students to scribble down in a table on the test paper. So we've got increase overall for bar chart A. We've got an increase overall and an increase in each category. And as many of you have pointed out, the higher the education, the higher the percentage ownership. Okay, and the last thing, often these two diagrams, one of them will have more information or extra information or different information, and it's worth making a note of that as well. So what extra information do we have from paragraph B? Again, put your ideas in the chat box. what's something else that we're going to need to refer to when we're writing our report? Yeah, the educational institutes, the educational levels. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so the other information we've got in this particular set of diagrams is we've got in bar chart B, they give us information on 5 different levels of education. So that's something else. So this table, which actually I know it's taken us a bit of time going through because we've been flipping back to the diagram, but if you're just doing it very quickly on a piece of paper, you can do this very quickly, and that gives you the information that you need to write the report on these diagrams. So the introduction. Okay, so again, what does the red show in this case? What are the words and phrases in red? Yes, the correlation, the connection, absolutely. Okay, very good. And what about the information in green? What does that tell us? Okay. Yes, yep, it's the rephrasing of the second chart. What about purple? What's purple? Yeah, the trend, Sean, or in fact, it's the overview for the first diagram, bar chart A, a gradual rise in the number of people with computers between 2002 and 2010. Okay, so that's the overview for the first diagram. So what about the information in brown? What is that? Yeah, Michaela. It's the overview for the second one. So an overall increase, but also shows that the higher the level of education, the higher the percentage of computer ownership. So we've got the two, we've got rephrasing, and we've got the two overviews, and we've got the correlation between the two. Excuse me. Okay. So how do we organise this one? And this, when they're closely related, the organisation is different. So let's just go through. So we do the introduction and we put in the overviews as normal. And this time we can write one body paragraph. Okay, we're not separating these two diagrams because they're closely related, and therefore we have to closely relate the information in our actual writing. Okay, and we'd start with the more general data. So remember, I was saying that very often one of them gives a more general view and one gives much more detail. So the body paragraph would start with a brief description, because there's not a lot to say about that, because there's just an overall increase in ownership. Obviously, you want to put some data in there, but don't need to put a huge amount in. Sorry. And then sort of more of a description of the increase in ownership as educational level increases, because we also want to make comparisons with that. And a description of any differences in the two trends, if there are any differences. Here we've got very similar trends. Sometimes we have trends which are quite different. So we still describe them, but we do put in any differences as well, if there are any. And again, the same thing. A conclusion, if there's any time. Again, I think a lot of you said right at the beginning that one of the problems with the two diagram question is a problem of time. So please be reassured, or reassure your students, that the conclusion really, really is not essential, and if they don't have time to do it, it's really not a problem. It's much more important that you write a strong introduction and good solid body paragraph with all the necessary data to support your overviews, and not worry about a conclusion. Okay, so again, this is the one body paragraph that we need. And again, I'll just give you a minute or two just to read through. And again, thinking about what the words and phrases in different colours means. But just let you read through that for a moment. Okay, so you can see that in actual fact, the first bar chart, we've only really got 3 sentences about it, because there's not a huge amount to actually report on. But there's a great deal more to report on when you've got these 5 different levels of education, and that's where the bulk is. And this is a pattern that's very often true of this type of question. So the information in red is, again, what is that in the chat box, please? What have I put in red? Yes, the changes, again, the standard vocabulary, growth, increase, rise, rose, grew, etc. Yep, absolutely. And in green? Yep, yes, thanks, Martine. Okay, Michaela. Thank you very much. I'm glad it was useful. Good luck with your class. Okay, yeah, so green again is the approximations, because it's important that we don't say 35% of people when it's not absolutely clear that it is exactly 35%. And again, the blue, what's that showing? Yes, Martine, yeah. Anna? Yes, this is making the links, making the comparisons between either the 2 diagrams where we've got this rise is mirrored. Okay, so you're making a comparison between the 2 diagrams, and then further down, you're making a comparison between the different levels of education and computer ownership. Okay, let's summarize. I want to leave some time. I noticed quite a few questions in Q&A, and I'd like to leave some time to deal with those. So just a quick test for you. So the first question to ask is, are the diagrams showing different but connected information? So if it's different but connected, how many body paragraphs should you write? As a guide, nothing's absolute, but as a guide, if you've got 2 diagrams showing different but connected information, yes, okay, everyone's been listening, excellent, 2. And obviously just the 1 for the closely related. Okay, good. So things to look out for is they're showing different but connected. What is the point of crossover? What is the connection? It could be quite small, but you do need to notice it and put that into your introduction, and then write the 2 body paragraphs. If they're showing closely related, you've got to pick out the main similarities or differences or changes. And I would strongly recommend that you just do a quick table, because then you can look at it very quickly. And it reminds you that you mustn't miss out on putting that data into your report. Okay, and so the main points is an overview and then write generally one body paragraph. Okay, so let's go over to a question and answer. Elizabeth, that's a really good question. I don't know if everybody can see the question. She's asking if it's possible to listen again to the recording. So useful. Well, thank you for that comment. I believe it is all going to be online and that you can, I'm not sure whether you can download it or whether you can just listen to it again on the net, but I'm pretty sure it is there. Okay. Do put any questions that you have into Q&A at this point. Sean is saying, can you get the PowerPoint slides? I'm not sure you can get them, but I think you can see the actual PowerPoint again. I will check that out with the organisers, because you will all have registered with email addresses. I'll check with Jonathan whether it's okay, and if they're agreed to it, I'll just send everybody the PowerPoint. I'm very happy to share it with people, as I understand you know, it's fast and you're having to listen and do lots of things at the same time. So I'll check, and I'll ask Jonathan if he can send the slides on to everybody. Resources for preparation, Kim, we're just about to get on to that. Just trying to go through the questions. The lady from the British Council, oh, she went to Louisa. Louisa's a colleague of mine. Thanks for Sean. Okay, well, that's fine. Then if Louisa is sharing her slides with you, I'll happily share them too. I will make sure that I get, or at least I can send the slides to Jonathan, who will have your details registered, and he can send them. So that's absolutely fine. Just seeing if, okay. Okay, so let's have a look. Raymond is saying some teachers suggest doing a rough plan before writing task 1, while other experienced teachers believe drafting a quick plan is not recommended. Oh, Raymond, it's a very good question. I certainly suggest doing a rough plan before writing task 2, because I think that really does help enormously for students to get their thinking, to get that coherence in the writing task 2. Writing task 1, no, I don't think the plan is quite simple. You read in your introduction, you rephrase questions, you put in the overview, and then in the body paragraph, you write the data that supports the overview. So in actual fact, excuse me, it's already pre-planned in effect. So I don't think there's enough time in 20 minutes, particularly if you have 2 diagrams and you're having to, excuse me, absorb a lot of information and trying to make comparisons and trying to see patterns. So I don't think it's necessary for writing task 1, but I would strongly recommend it for writing task 2. Anna's asking, do you recommend going through grammar aspects when discussing the writing task? Yeah, I do it afterwards, Anna. So what I do is, you know, I don't do writing in class because there's so much to do that I get my students to do their writing as homework. And then what I would do is pick out, if you like, typical errors from, you know, my group, my class, and possibly do a little bit of teaching of grammar at the beginning of the next class. But otherwise, I sort of obviously mark up the essay or report they've written and mark out the errors and ask them to correct them, and deal with the grammar only when there's a common problem, because very often I'm teaching on a 30-hour IELTS preparation class, so there isn't a great deal of time for grammar. Okay, okay. I think that's all the questions coming in for the moment. So let's just go through, excuse me, the resources. Okay, so for those of you who are test takers, the best site, the mothership, if you like, is takeielts.org, and it's got stacks and stacks of support material and free practice tests. For teachers amongst you, please go to Teach IELTS, all one word, teachielts.org. And again, you've got free lesson plans, you've got free material, you've got tests and everything else that you can use, you can download and use directly with your students. But this is really support for test takers. So if you've got questions that perhaps you're not at class anymore because of the pandemic, and many of us around the world are sort of now back under lockdown, so perhaps not having classes, not having access to information, do join our official Facebook page where we have an extra, you can send your questions and they will answer them actually directly to you, and that's really quite useful. We also have an official Facebook page for teachers, which is like a forum where you can ask questions and exchange expertise with each other, which is fun really and very useful. I think many of you know that the test is also now computer delivered. And of course, this is actually an option that's become very popular during the COVID period, because you don't have these large rooms of 200, 300 candidates. So it's a sort of a safer environment to deliver the test. If you're not sure whether you would prefer to do it on paper or computer delivered, do go to Take IELTS. All of this information is on our Take IELTS site, and you can actually do a free computer delivered test. And you can just see whether you feel comfortable. You can get used to the keyboard and what you need to know. If you're thinking of computer delivered, I would strongly recommend that you go and have a practice first. Also free is Road to IELTS, where again you've got downloadable practice tests, you've got interactive activities and tips and things like that. There's 10 hours, excuse me, 10 hours which is completely free, and you can use that. If you are registered to take the IELTS test with the British Council, then there's an additional 20 hours, so a total of 30 hours. There is a full 120 hours worth of material, but that is a paid for service, I'm afraid. But the first 10 or 30 hours are free. The Future Learn is a MOOC, a massive online course, open online course. It's a 3-week course. So if you're preparing for IELTS and you're not taking it until sort of the new year, do go to Future Learn. It's a collaboration between Future Learn and the British Council. Do go to that. It's completely free and it's really, really useful stuff. Many teachers I know have also done the course and found it equally useful. So do go and have a look at that, if you've got the time, obviously, to prepare. Right now, you can just download the IELTS Prep app for free onto your phone. And again, practice tests, grammar exercises, quizzes, and things like that. So do give that a whirl as well. And finally, books and study guides. It's the official IELTS practice materials and the top tips, which we recommend because they're actually IELTS. There's lots of material sort of out there, stacks of stuff on the internet, of course, but do be careful about some of the advice you get. It's a good idea to go to Take IELTS, which is British Council, but also to go to IELTS.org itself, which is obviously the IELTS organisation, or go to Cambridge, which is another partner of IELTS. So it's sort of a Cambridge University, British Council and IDP in Australia. So their sites, our sites, actually have the expertise in some ways and probably more reliable. So do try some of these things. And I hope that helps you with the preparation for the test. And I think at that point, unless anybody's got any more questions, any more last minute questions? Thank you very much for your comments. No, thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody, for attending this. I hope you all stay well and safe, and with luck, who knows, maybe next year we'll actually meet face to face. And don't worry, I will check up about sending the slides on to you. Okay. Take care. Bye-bye.